All right, yeah, thank you very much for coming, everybody. My first big in-person event after Corona, probably for many here in the room. So today I want to talk about an application that we are working on that brings basically the flight simulator into the real world using augmented reality. And in the very beginning, I actually want to just show you a 6-minute video, which more or less explains the whole concept, and it's roughly the same time that it takes the flight simulator to load up. So it's Corona times. My brother, he celebrated this Christmas this year in Austria. I'm celebrating US. We couldn't meet, but we had an idea how we still could meet up. And this is my brother. He loves airplanes and he loves flying. And why couldn't he just come by with his airplane to say hi? So in the real world, it's a bit difficult. It's just he just flies these small 2 to 4 person airplanes. But he also has a flight simulator. And the Microsoft Flight Simulator allows you to fly around in this really realistic world. For example, fly over in Palo Alto. Problem is, I don't see him if he flies over my house. Now we made an AR application that streams the location of his plane from the flight simulator to my AR device, which now allows me to look up and actually see my brother flying around in the real world. All right, so here we are in Stanford. In the back you see the Hoover Tower. And on this screen, soon my brother, who's actually currently sitting in Austria in front of his computer, he will try to start and land his little yellow Piper airplane, while I'll try to take my AR devices like the cell phone and watch around, trying to see him fly around in the real world. So just to give a small explanation, on the left you basically see a screen capture of the smartphone. On the right you see what you're already used to. This is basically just what you see in the flight simulator. Yep. Super. Starte schön Richtung Süden. Und biegst ein Richtung Turm. Und jetzt kommst du direkt über mich drüber. Jetzt wieder ab Richtung Süden. Drehst ein Richtung Mainport. Super, ist alles frei. Niemand da. Hat doch ein paar Leute da laufen auf dem. Aber du verpasst es sehr gut. Perfekt. Sehr schön. Flieg einfach mal weiter, flieg mal noch eine Runde. Fahr mal einfach und flieg einfach gerade nochmal runter. Das war super. Dann haben wir gleich den zweiten Take, ohne einfach nochmal neu aufzunehmen. So this was the first flight, watched on the smartphone. So for the second flight, I actually want to see my brother fly around in the real world. And this was made possible with Microsoft Hololens. And we needed to do a small workaround, so the Hololens does not have a GPS. That's why we still send everything to the smartphone. Set up a network connection between these two, synchronize the spaces, which allowed us to view my brother through the Hololens flying around with his Piper airplane. Der Überflug ist auch gut, der ist auch wichtig, der ist nicht auch immer super. Genau, wie es gestartet. Some of these comments I will discuss in more detail later, for example, the visibility on the Hololens. Auf der Hololens war wahrscheinlich zu weit weg. Da kommt er schon, da kommt er. Also ich gerade wieder verloren, wo war ich? Da oben irgendwo. Von Norden rein. Ah, ja, ich sehe dich, okay. Ja, nicht rein. Das ist hier bei mir noch hinterm Baum. Aber ich sehe dich auf der Hololens. Und du kommst, genau, du landest wunderschön hier auf dem Oval. Sehr schön, ja, die war perfekt, die Landung, super. Fahr mal kurz zu mir. Fahr mal kurz auf mich zu.
Und auf den asphaltierten Weg zurück.
Ja. Und komm mal bis zu mir. Alright, so this gave you basically more or less a good idea of what this whole application is about. And now I want to explain how we did that in a bit more detail. And also one thing already to announce, we later have a demo. We do the demo outside because obviously it's much better if you see the plane flying around in the sky instead of inside the room. We don't have the demo with the HoloLens. I just brought my smartphone with me. But let's hope that we get that to work. Before, at least, when we tried it out, it worked well. So after the talk, please find us somewhere outside from the registration booth. So here's, first of all, like a more detailed schematic of what the application looked like. It starts all with the flight simulator. In our case, it was really just the Microsoft Flight Simulator. You saw on the left, you see the little Piper plane that my brother used. In theory, actually, it does not have to be restricted to the Microsoft Flight Simulator. It could be any flight simulator, as long as it's like a system where you have a well-defined one-to-one mapping between the virtual world and the real world. What you then also need is an application that retrieves information from the flight simulator. So in our case, we do this with the SimConnect app. So the SimConnect app, some of you might know already, it's very often used to create content for the flight simulator. For example, you can use it to create virtual models. People very often, for example, create very realistic airports and then sell them in the Microsoft Store. Here's one example where we did something similar. We took a model of myself and then placed it into the flight simulator. So my brother saw me. Unfortunately, I was stationary. I was not moving around. So this was a bit of a hack. It would be nice to actually have this person moving. But this is not yet possible. So with the flights, with the SimConnect SDK, we were then reading out the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the airplane and sending it out with the UDP protocol to our server. Our server was actually then very simple. Our server just basically receives a single stream of data, latitude, longitude, and altitude of the airplane, and sends it out to our augmented reality device. Now we are asked already, oh, can we perhaps make this into a real app that we put on the App Store that people can try out, which we would be interested in. The server, however, the server is still like for this kind of application the biggest obstacle at the moment, because the server will become much more complicated. Once you have multiple different planes coming in, you have to sort which values belong to which plane and then send it out to the respective applications. Jörg Neumann from Microsoft, he also saw the app already, and we asked him, can't we just somehow make that you log in with your Microsoft account and then it streams automatically and you see all your friends? But unfortunately, we haven't heard back so far whether they want to support us with that. Now the third application is basically where all the magic happens. This is the mobile application. This is what you saw on the smartphone and then also on the HoloLens. This consists of several parts. So if I have a smartphone, in this case it was an Android phone and a Google Pixel, so just a normal Android phone, could also work with the iPhone. You have something that's called simultaneous localization and mapping. So basically what the phone does, it maps the surrounding space. Some people might know that already, for example, from Pokemon, where you then place a Pokemon somewhere on the ground so that it looks like realistically sitting inside the world. And the software that we use for that is ARCore. So ARCore is doing the SLAM and the mapping of the surrounding world for Android phones. ARKit is basically the same software, but it's doing the same thing for iPhones. Now, after we have mapped our surrounding space, we now take some additional sensors. We take the GPS coordinates, and we take the compass, which is basically a combination of the magnetometer and the accelerometer of the phone.
And the GPS, in combination with the compass, now allows us to basically place certain GPS positions in this AR core mapped space. And now, so we know from the GPS already where we are ourselves in the space. And if we receive GPS coordinates from a plane, using the compass, we can figure out, okay, in which direction our map space should this plane be. There is one limitation, and that is our phone also gives us an altitude, but the altitude is very inaccurate. And so for the latitude and longitude for the GPS, it doesn't matter so much if it's inaccurate. You saw that actually in the video. You saw when the plane was taxiing that it was slightly off from the way, it was perhaps 5 centimeters to the left. But the offset in, like inside, let's call it the dimensions that are x and y dimensions here, they don't matter so much, because if the plane is flying 5 centimeters left or to the right, we do not really care. We do care, however, if the plane is a little bit too high or a little bit too low. Even if it's just 5 meters too low, then suddenly it lands below the ground, or it lands above the ground. So it just doesn't look nice. And because the sensors of our phone are not good enough for this, we made a workaround. We basically were looking up the altitude of the position where the user is standing. And then we're using these altitude values and subtracting them from the altitude values of the plane to get an accurate ground plane. So now we have the application where we receive in regular intervals the altitude and the GPS positions of the airplane. Now we did not just have the plane, so these values, they come in regularly but not fast enough that it leads to a smooth movement. So if we just move our plane from point to point, it would sort of be a jumpy motion from point to point. It wouldn't look like a very realistic motion. That's why we made the sort of a spline curve interpolation between different points that we received, which leads to this more realistic and smooth movement of the airplane. And for this, because we always receive multiple values and perform this interpolation, we also need to do some buffering. So you saw there was some delay in the video. This buffering can also be, depending on how many values you buffer, this can also be much longer. For example, here right now, we set it up to buffer a little bit longer because we are not sure about the internet speed, so that it doesn't suddenly stay in space or doesn't move anymore if you don't receive values for a second or two. So now how do we localize the plane? There are several ways to localize the plane once it's nearby. One thing is the spatial audio. It doesn't actually help you so much on the phone. So you do hear it getting louder or getting less loud when it's further away, when it's closer by. You'll also see that in the demo later. It doesn't help you so much with the left and right direction. For the HoloLens, on the other hand, the spatial audio can actually help you to localize the plane better based on the position of the airplane. We then also gave some additional help to the user to find the airplane in the sky. One was just a distance measure, which was also just helpful for debugging. The distance measure tells us how far the plane currently is to the user. And then I think you also saw that in the video where you have these arrows on the side which point to the direction of the airplane. So now to the HoloLens application. For the HoloLens application, the HoloLens does also have this very nice spatial mapping. So the HoloLens requires a spatial mapping in order to figure out where it is located in space, so that it knows, okay, now I move to the right or to the front, and I need to place my virtual content at a certain position in space. What the HoloLens unfortunately does not have is a GPS or the compass that our smartphone has. So that's why we had to do a workaround. So we were still using the smartphone. You saw me standing there with the smartphone. And then we were, as a first step, synchronizing the smartphone mapped the AR core space around the smartphone and the HoloLens mapped space. And this synchronization between these spaces can be done very accurately if you have an image marker, one of these QR tags. If both your devices recognize this QR tag, it allows these devices to understand where they are located in space with regard to this tag. and then you can use that information to transform one from one space to the other. So once these spaces were recognized and were synchronized, we could then basically, like the plane was still visible on the phone, it was flying around on the phone, but we could then stream the plane position from the smartphone to the HoloLens, which now also allowed the plane to fly around in the HoloLens, even though we didn't have the GPS. So there were some limitations that you already saw in the video as well so far about this application. One that was probably very evident to every avid flight simulator user was that the plane movement did not look very realistic so far. So the roll and the pitch and the yaw were not transmitted. Right now, we were basically just interpolating the path based on these GPS coordinates. We did not actually transmit information about the roll, pitch, and yaw. This would, in theory, be possible. So the SimConnect SDK allows it to transmit much more values. But yeah, we have not implemented it so far. Would be a nice next step. And actually also, if somebody is very interested in this application, somebody is good at coding and wants to also work on this, please let me know afterwards. Happy to share this and then collaborate this to bring this a bit further. Another issue was occlusion. So occlusion, you saw also in the video that the plane always appeared in front of the background. And now, in theory, the AR Core, AR Kit, they allow you to basically create a depth map. Also, the HoloLens allows you to create a depth map of the environment. And if you have a depth map of the environment, you can then calculate whether a certain virtual object is before the depth map environment or behind. So you should be able to calculate whether something is occluded or not. And this works also quite well if you're like looking for Pokemon. You have a Pokemon just standing 5 meters in front of you behind a bush. It does not work well, turn out, if things are further away than 10 meters. So if we have an airplane in 50, 100 meters away, then these depth maps were not accurate enough. So that's why we basically just turned it off. And right now, the airplane is always shown in front of the background. In theory, it might be possible to actually get the occlusion more realistic if you have very detailed maps of the surrounding environment, also including like the trees and house and everything, so that you can, from this map that you already have pre-acquired, that you can calculate from this map whether the plane is visible at a certain position or not. Visibility. Visibility was not an issue with the phone. So the phone always draws the plane on the screen. The HoloLens works slightly different. So the HoloLens has an additive light display. That means that it has waveguide displays, and it always adds light on top of the real world. And this is a display type that usually has problems in front of very bright background. So you saw me, for example, standing outside when my brother was starting, and when he was then very far away in the sky, I had problems actually seeing him in the HoloLens. You saw him in the video because the screen capture of the HoloLens works slightly differently. Again, basically draws the virtual content on the real background. But what I saw, if the plane was very far away against bright background or against the sun, was that the plane was hardly visible. That's why I was sometimes then checking on my phone where the plane is located. If the plane was in front of dark background, for example, in front of trees, if it was close by or if it was on the ground, then it's also very visible on the HoloLens. So now about future steps. So I showed you basically right now only this one direction, the streaming from the flight simulator to the mobile application. The other direction right now is not yet implemented. Would be very nice, though, to implement this. If we can also stream the location from the real-world user to the flight simulator so that you see them also walk around or drive around inside a flight simulator. So this would be a nice next application, which would then allow us to not just place a stationary model in the real world, but also have this model move around based on the actual user position. So yeah, this was more details about this augmented reality application and how we are able to take these airplanes from the flight simulator and show them fly around in the real world using our AR devices. We will now, afterwards, set up the demo outside, so please come by to try it out yourself. And now also, please ask any questions. Now we have time for questions.
If you do have any questions, please raise your hand and I will come over and give you a microphone so that we can have people on the live stream. No questions currently coming online, so feel free to give those questions. But I'm going to pass it down to here in the front.
Hi, Charles, San Mateo, California. I was wondering, you were saying about the server being a problem in the chain. Have you ever considered maybe using a service like FlightSim, for example, which has its own API and can spit out all this data into your app, a bit like Flight Radar does in real world?
We did not know, actually. And that's also because I have more augmented reality expertise than the networking background. But if you know that in detail, it would be great if you send us a mail, and it would be nice to look into that, how we can set it up. Yes.
Hey, I was just curious if you've had any devices that you found that you've tried besides the HoloLens, and you were saying that there are some issues when you're looking towards a brightly lit area. If you found any off-the-cuff solutions like tinting the lens or any other visual devices like that that have been useful.
Right now, so no, we basically right now really just try these two devices, the smartphone, in our case the Android phone, and the HoloLens. These additive light displays generally have this problem. Yes, you can probably tint the display, make it just a general display darker, and this might be a solution. So the US Army right now is actually also using or buying over the next years a lot of these HoloLens devices. They modify them slightly, and because they're always using it outside, they also might tint the glass much more. But we just used the vanilla version. We didn't modify it.
Question from online from Ian. Can we find the video somewhere online, such as YouTube, like the video that you created?
Yes. Yes, you can. Does he have access to the WUVA app?
You should, as an attendee, whether he's virtual or not. So if you go online, he can post the...
I'll post the link in this WUVA app. Excellent. I can do that. Yeah.
Any other questions out there that I might have missed? Yes. Hold on.
So I just added it as a question into our agenda for this session. I don't exactly know how. Yeah. So if you look for the question in the session, you should see like the link to the video.
Hi, I'm Bill Clark. Just wanted to know if you guys are going to make us into a product. Is this going to be something that's available right now or sometime in the future, or is it going to be something we buy, or is it something to be freeware? What are your plans for marketing this thing?
Yes, unfortunately, actually, no, right now we did not yet have plans to make this a big commercial thing. So that's also why if there are some developers who are interested to drive this further, would be very happy to reach out. This was more like a hobby project between me and my brother. So my brother, he's using a lot of the flight simulator. He's also in the flying club in Innsbruck. I'm using a lot of augmented reality and for work doing a lot of medical mixed reality applications. So if somebody is interested to make this into a product, we are very happy to support you with that. And
okay. My second question is, do you guys plan on working on the axes in order to be able to support that by adding more software, and then maybe hopefully getting the feedback back from the person out somewhere in the field, either in HoloLens or your handheld, to be able to send data back? Is that something you're continuing to work on and then make that available as a tool to whatever developer wanted to use it?
So for how to get the role pitch and yaw into the application, this is something where we actually do have a very good idea how this is possible. So we are able to extract many more values. And we could receive them and then sort of interpolate between different role values to get a more realistic pose of the plane. For streaming information back into the flight simulator, we are not yet sure how you can, if you can, and or then also how you can, not just place 3D assets into the flight simulator, but how you can update their position. It should be possible because it's done with planes in multiplayer. But I'm not exactly sure how to do with assets. Yeah. So this might be good to get feedback from somebody Perhaps from Microsoft, though, is working with the SimConnect SDK.
Another question from online, this is from Gene. What are the next steps with this augmented reality? What do you have as a vision for this?
So right now it would be, if there are developers out there who are interested in working further on this and implementing some of these limitations that we have talked about, that would be great. Please reach out to us. Here you see our email addresses. Right now, we always thought about, OK, let's implement some of these steps. I'm not exactly sure yet about the timeline. So, yeah.